Good morning and welcome to a live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events. Current events this morning here. We're looking at current events as we do our live talk program covering current events. And our topic we're covering is FEMA camp conspiracy and the less fortunate. FEMA camp conspiracy and the less fortunate. So I'll be connecting some things here this morning as we do our live program. So welcome. Hope you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your word, for your guidance by thy spirit, and for the observation that you give us in what's happening around us. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might understand and that we might be careful in this world and this country. May you be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So we're looking here at this topic, FEMA camps, conspiracy theory, and the less fortunate. So we're tying up two things here. I have some reading I have to do for you. And I want to share this idea here with you about this concept here of the FEMA camp conspiracy theory and the less fortunate. We're looking at how conspiracy theorists look away when the theory or the results of the theory, the concept of the theory are inflicted on others. So this is what I want to look at. Very important. So you have the theory. I'll share the theory in a few minutes here. And I want to show you now that the basic premise of the theories, many of these theories I'm sure you've heard, and you'll hear a conspiracy theorists, they go into detail of like the concept of the FEMA camp and how the FEMA camp is going to be used against them. They're going to be the target. But when it is not used against them and used against others, they normally look away and they say, well, nothing's happening. As long as it's not me, it's good, or it's all right, or I don't care, or they're happy. And many of them right now are very happy. So that's why my topic again is FEMA camp conspiracy theory and the less fortunate. How this FEMA camp conspiracy theory, which we're going to talk about in a second, is being inflicted, and the focal point is the immigrants, the illegal immigrants coming into America. Or the same ideas are being inflicted, the same concepts, but now it's not them, it's somebody else. So they like not important. Also, is illegal immigrants coming to America similar to a person committing a federal crime? Should they be treated similarly, especially with the fact that they carry their kids along for the crime? So say, for instance, you had a person that was going to break into a bank or rob a post office, and they did that crime. That's a bad crime. Normally, it's a crime that the federal government will hit you hard. But now this person, while they were doing the crime, they picked the kids up from school and they went for a routine trip to go rob a bank with the kids in the car, knowing that probably there's going to be police and there could be an overwhelming response, and then the kids could get even shot or killed. So should this be the treatment? And notice here, this is the type of thing that is going on, the kind of like, remember, because now there's a federal crime being broken. So this is what I want to look at here. So FEMA camp conspiracy theory and the less fortunate, how these theories and the concepts and how they're supposed to be inflicted on others, how when they inflicted on others, how they look away. Now in Matthew chapter 25, verse 37 through 40, Matthew chapter 25, verse 37 through 40, it says, Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick, or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. So the least, normally, as you know, Christ's disciples were relentlessly persecuted by the Jews and ultimately the Roman government was used as another tool by the Jews to persecute the righteous. Later on, with people like Nero, the Roman government persecuted the Christians. Later on, through the Pope acting as if he's religious, but he's really just still the head of Rome, he persecuted again the Christian. So the Roman entity always is there to persecute the righteous. And this is what the devil has been using. So when we look at this here, he says, when you do it to the least of these, my brethren, you do it unto me. And so the question so much is not the FEMA camps, which I'm going to clarify in a second, being inflicted, the concept of it is being inflicted on, say, Warren Buffett or, say, Jeff Bezos or Bezos. That's not the issue. The issue is not it inflicted on the DuPont family or the Rockefeller family or the Rothschild family or the Trump family. This is not the issue, because this was never been the issue. The issue is when it is inflicted, these draconian laws and rules and this harsh treatment is inflicted on the less fortunate. See, we look at Adolf Hitler and we will say, some people will say, at least because there's people in America who think he's a great person, and people different parts of the world over. But you look at Adolf Hitler, you say he took advantage and beat up the weak. And we will look at him as though we look at a pedophile. We say this is somebody taking advantage of the young, taking advantage of people who are disabled, taking advantage of people who are broke, fooling people up who don't have the brain power to resist them intellectually. These are what you call con men. So you look at that person, you say that person is a monster. And this is normally how we would judge. So when we talk about this type of stuff about the FEMA camp, I think the people who spread these theories, they fail to understand that it's not so much when it is inflicted on those who can resist and who are the head of the system, because that's not how it works. It's when it's done to those who are less fortunate, when it's done to those who are powerless. This is when your voice needs to be heard. But when that is being done, they say, well, that's not how it works. It only matters if it's being done to Americans, and primarily white Americans. Then that's when we need to pay attention. But if it's not being done to us, well, there's no conspiracy, there's no problem, and it needs to do. So let me go to my first set of reading here I'm just reading here from Wikipedia, and then after that I'll read an article about what's going on the southern border to the illegal immigrants that are coming in into America. So the FEMA camp conspiracy theory holds that the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is planning to imprison U.S. citizens in concentration camps. This is typically described as following the imposition of martial law in the United States after a major disaster or crisis. In some versions of the theory, only suspected dissidents will be imprisoned. In more extreme versions, a large number of U.S. citizens will be imprisoned for the purpose of extermination as a new world order is established. The conspiracy theory has existed since the late 1970s, but it has picked up greatly in popularity with the advent of the internet and social media platforms. So I pause there because the article paused also. So this is the thing, and as I say, you probably heard about it, over the years or decades, because it started around 1970 when this was started by President Jimmy Carter. So this idea here of, notice the focus is U.S. citizens. Now we know in the Bible, Revelation 13 talks about there's going to be a similar issue of imposition on a group of people. But those group of people, as the Bible described to us, are people who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. The law keepers, the righteous, the saints, those who are the remnant. That's what the Bible teaches us. So such a thing will happen. So they're looking at this, there's no question. But notice here, it says they will round up dissidents will be imprisoned. So these are dissidents. So these are not people who are part of the main line. These are people who are disagreeing with what's going on. They're protesters, they're protesting the evils that are being inflicted. So, and then they say here, more extreme version, large number of U.S. citizens will be imprisoned for the purpose of extermination as the New World Order is established. Again, the Bible does teach such an idea that in the last days what will happen is that if you read Revelation 13 from 11 to the end, you'll see there that it says that those who do not accept the mark of the beast will be have the death penalty put on them. That means you either accept it or you'll be killed, right? That's what the Bible, or you'll be killed. That's the actual close to the words that are used. So when you see this idea here, you say, okay, here's a theory that lines up with what has happened in the past. I'm going to read about that in a second, and what the Bible predicts will happen in the United States. But yet the conspiracy theorists cannot see that what the problem is that when you have a system that keep exercising itself, but it's not exercising itself on who you think it's exercising it on, it's just simply exercising. It's spreading, it's building its muscle. That what they're doing, they're kind of watching the system grow and encouraging the system grow, because the system is growing, but it's not growing to persecute those that they think it's supposed to persecute. It's growing to persecute those that they think it's not. So in other words, let's say that properly. So the system that is going to do this is in place and it's building, but it's not going after who they think. It's going after illegal immigrants. It's going after terrorists. It's going after various different nefarious groups, and it's doing things under the concept of the suspension of the Constitution. So it is operating in broad daylight, but it's not operating, how would I say, it's not operating the way they think it's operating. So as it's operating, it's already in existence and being inflicted on others. But when it gets to the point where the Bible predicts in Revelation 13, where it will do it openly and with approval to the righteous, by then the system is grown big and it's out of control. And if you see that, this is what's coming, because it's already here, because it's just a system, because the system now is holding its grips the terrorists, and it's saying the terrorist has no rights. And this is why I ask the question, is the Constitution God-given right, or the Constitution only right that Americans have? Or does Americans extend that right to others because they believe in the Constitution that, again, these are rights that are not human rights, but God-given right? It's the right that comes from the Creator, and you can alienate it from others. So it's the moment I come in contact with an American who believes in the Constitution, he will look at me and say, you have certain human rights, and I'm going to protect your rights and fight for your rights. Or I'm developing a system in America that say, unless you're a citizen, I will never extend that right to you. So I'm going to treat you the way that the FEMA camp conspiracy theory says. And even the conspiracy theorists that put out such a concept, they would applaud and say, great, lock them up, treat them like animals because they're not Americans. And that is where I think, as I'm looking at it, the system is going to get bigger and stronger, because what it is, some of the people who would be like, no, you can't treat me that way, they would turn around and say, yeah, but you can treat those illegal immigrants that way, or you can torture those terrorists, but you shouldn't torture me because we shouldn't have cruel and unusual punishment to people that we arrest. But if they're terrorists, well, they're not Americans anyhow, so torture them. You see, and this is what we've been watching over the years. So what it is, more and more every year, you have Americans who work for these FEMA-like camps, terrorist camps, terrorizing people. And more we have people who say, oh no, it's great. As long as they're not American, we can terrorize them all we want. And we can treat them like wild animals. So it's not so much what you do to them, it's what you become. So let's keep reading here about the FEMA camp conspiracy theory. Here is the arguments and variants. FEMA was established in 1979 under Executive order by President Jimmy Carter. It was established to coordinate the response to a major disaster that has occurred in the United States and that overwhelms local state authorities. However, proponent of the conspiracy theory argue that this is merely a cover for the organization's real purpose. The plan is to assume control of the United States following a major disaster or threat, either a genuine one or a manufactured one. Once the disaster or threat of one comes into being, the theory goes, martial law will be declared and FEMA emergency powers will come into operation. FEMA will then effectively be the government. The Constitution will be suspended. FEMA will move U.S. citizens into specially constructed camps, many of which have already been built. The organization has been described in this context as the executive arm of the coming police state. The proponents of the theory often play into racial fears, asserting that FEMA will use urban gangs as auxiliaries to ensure order. In many versions of the theory, dissidents typically define a constitutionalist, patriot, etc., rather than left-wingers, will merely be imprisoned. Others have gone so far as to argue that they will be sent to these camps to be murdered. Extreme versions of the theory states that plans are in place to imprison and kill apolitical American citizens in FEMA camps as part of a population control. FEMA conspiracies are often work in larger conspiracy narratives about ushering in a new world order, meaning a totalitarian global government. As evidence of the conspiracy theory, proponents point to suppose FEMA camps already existing in the United States. These, however, often have known established purpose such as Amtrak facilities, armed forces training centers. In some cases, genuine internment camps have been pointed to, but these have always been outside the United States. Proponents have also cited a contingency plan, Rex 84, drafted in part by Oliver North, calling for the suspension of the Constitution and the detainment of citizens in the event of a national crisis. This was aimed at left-wing activists, not the libertarian and right-wingers generally associated with the FEMA theory. This has been linked to the 1970 documentary by Louis Giuffrida, Giuffrida, if you're going to look into this. Years later, the director of FEMA calling for the establishment of martial law in the event of an uprising by African American militants and the internment of millions of African Americans. The conspiracy theorists have used the actual internment of Japanese Americans during World War II in specifically constructed camps as evidence that such a scenario at least has historic precedent. Similarly, the forced removal of Native Americans from their land is an early precedent, right? So that's the end of that I wanted to read. So here I share that information with you. So if you were listening to what I was saying in the beginning and you see the kind of narrative built up, you can see how they're pointing to all these things. And if I take them back in reverse, the Native Americans were removed from the land. You notice again, the Native Americans were removed because they were in the minority position. So the people who are putting forward the principles are normally people in the majority and they have the power, but they're saying it's going to come upon them. If you notice earlier when I was reading, normally the people who put forward these principles are normally right-wingers, conservatives, who believe that, and patriots, who believe that they're the one that's going to be put in FEMA camp. They're the one that's going to get their constitutional rights taken away. But while they're saying this, historically and currently, it is them that are supporting any action to do similar actions against, FEMA camp actions against people who are less fortunate. So if you go back in history, Native Americans, this is how they were treated. So they're thinking that what was done to the Native Americans is going to be done to them, while this is what's happening to people, various different groups. Also, they notice here Japanese American under World War II. This is what happened to them. They were treated at a similar concept of FEMA camp. Notice here they talk about a documentary that was done in the 1970s by Louis Gufrida, I think that's the name, who later became the director for FEMA. So he has this idea, put out a documentary to scare again people who are patriots, conservative America. He put out this documentary and say, hey, look, if the Black Americans or African Americans militants rise up against us, we would have to lock them in internment camps to protect ourselves, and we would have to lock up millions of them. So notice again, it's they're saying there's a conspiracy theory, and they're saying this is going to be done. But notice the guy that became the head of FEMA, he was already theorizing how to lock up Black Americans. He wasn't thinking about taking patriots and lock them up. He was thinking taking the Black Americans. So I think sometimes they miss this idea here that often it's the weak and less fortunate that get locked up into these situations. Notice here again, they say that and if you look at this thing, you've seen they say, oh, there's different camps, various different places. Well, if you look at it, these camps are being built, but right now they're being built to not lock up, the regular suspects, the people who are patriotic Americans. They're locking up immigrants. These are the similar concept. You have these camps or these holding cells. You build these holding cells to hold all these immigrants, lock them up and then deport them. So this is what it is. Also, just scanning here, a few more thoughts on this one here. So they think it's going to be, again, in many versions of the theory, dissidents typically defined as constitutionalists, people who are for the Constitution. Remember, when as America coming to its close, and the history of the world is coming to close because the Bible ties both, it's not so much the constitutionalists is going to be at risk as those who keep the commandments. That's what the Bible says. What the people are going to do is change the Constitution because they want to save America. And that's important to note, because remember, the people who are for the internment of the illegal immigrants that are coming into the country, they're trying to save America. The people who are for the war in Iraq, the people who are for the war on terrorism, or the people who are for a whole bunch of stuff that's going on right now, with all the stuff that's going on in putting Donald Trump in power. These are people who are trying to save America, and they'll do anything immoral or crazy in order to save the country, and thinking it's going to work. And we know the final act of the drama is that they will literally destroy the Constitution in order to save the country, which will do the opposite. It will actually destroy the country, because you're basically saying we will take away everybody's right in order to save the country. But America is America because we recognize that there's certain rights that are inalienable rights from God. So we have a problem here where you keep saying, yes, there are rights, but those rights only extend to a certain group of Americans. And we can take away the right for due process. Like if you notice right now, in America, there's this big discussion. Should we encourage the police to give, exercise due process and not be vicious and violent to people who are minority? And many Americans are saying, no, this is not how we function. You got to kill them. So when you see this type of event, it's always the issue. The problem is, do you give the rights to others? Or is this right only mine and I should be arguing for this right? And that's where the problem is, because they're saying if a football player kneel down and protest, he has no right to do that because there's no problem in America, or it's not the right time and place to be doing that. So we see this. So that's the FEMA camp theory. You get that. Now I'm gonna layer it now over with this other story here. This is now from USA Today. This is covering what's going on the border. As you know, I've been kind of following this news piece, what's happening to the illegal immigrants, the aliens, the invaders, whatever you want to call them, whatever they want to call them, that is coming in, the strangers that are coming in inside of America. And remember, the second question I was asking there, and I'll read it again for you, is immigrant coming, an illegal immigrant coming to America, similar to a person committing a federal crime, and should they be treated similarly, especially with the fact that they carry their kids along for the crime? Because remember, they come into the country, they're breaking a law. Is that law supposed to be like a federal law where somebody go and blow up a building or shoot up a place or, kill some post office workers? Should they? And then they did that with the kids next to them. You imagine a person having what do you call it? That thing that they carry the kids on the back or the chest while robbing a bank. How should you treat that? All right. So that's what because there's some, I've been seeing a lot of Americans say that their kids should be taken away from them because they're committing a crime, a massive crime on the American people while with their kids there with them. That's how they view this as a crime they're committing with their kids in tow. So this here is from USA Today, written by Rick Jervis, and it's entitled "New Zero Tolerance Policy on Border Creates Overflow Court Hearing in South Texas." The government's new zero tolerance policy towards documented immigrants and its tactics of separating families at the border has taxed the immigration system from overflowing holding facilities to crammed court. So I pause there. So they have a zero tolerance policy. I think it was last Thursday, I covered this policy. Zero tolerance policy towards a person. So if you're coming in and say you're coming in and you're literally running, screaming from the gangs down south of the border, and you come to the American border, they would say, okay, they'll just take you, arrest you, take your kids from you, and say you've committed a crime. And they wouldn't say it's you're seeking asylum. They say it's just a crime. And some Americans are saying we should just take them and just immediately push them back over the border. But here, the system is they're offered a process, a hearing. And so some are saying, no, they shouldn't be offered a hearing. They should just be caged up and then shoved back over the border because they're not American. Why will you process them? Which is why I keep asking the question. Is it the Constitution? Is it just inalienable rights? Recognize that these are God-given rights to human beings, or is it just rights given to Americans? So we keep reading here. Nowhere is this more evident than the 8th floor courtroom of the U.S. District Court of Southern District of Texas in this border town, the busiest in the nation for illegal crossing. On Wednesday morning, 72 shackled defendants shuffled into the court, filling nearly all 6 rows of wooden pews. Handcuffs were removed during the hearing, but their ankles remain shackled together. All right. So this is what's happening. So this is one of the imagery that I'm seeing. They shackle them, at their feet, and then they're handcuffed. So these are like some, most actually they have to secure them some way. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't secure them, because you have 72 people. They could go wandering off to the bathroom and then disappear, which they already crossed the border, so I wouldn't put it past them. They're fighting for survival. So they're shackled and handcuffed. They're not carried to get burgers or anything. They're not brought by the police to get burgers or anything like that. They had all been charged with a federal misdemeanor for crossing into the U.S. without papers. 13 of them have been separated from their children, some as young as 6 years old. Another similar size hearing was scheduled for later in the afternoon. Before the policy was enacted in May, the court would see about 20 to 30 immigrants a day charged with crimes. Says Zalia Aleman Bendik, and Assistant Federal Public Defender with a court. Today, the number hovers around 150. The numbers are just staggering, she said in an interview with USA Today. I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to keep up with this flow. The Trump administration last month began stepping up criminal prosecution of people crossing the border illegally, charging nearly everyone who crosses over without proper documentation with a federal misdemeanor. By doing so under current law, children entering the U.S. alongside adults fall under the care of the Office of Refugees Resettlement or with those criminal cases while those criminal cases are pursued. The U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said the policy is intended to act as a deterrent to others considering crossing illegally into U.S. So let's pause right there. So notice here, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the policy is intended to act as a deterrent. So is the policy supposed to be there or not supposed to be there? So if the policy is not supposed to be there, it's just there as a deterrent. So then is it lawful? Is it the right thing to do? Or is it just to be there as a deterrent? So the treatment and the process is there. So remember, all this is going on. And the same conspiracy theorists who are worried about being locked up into FEMA camps, which is the type of camps that they're locking these people up and their children and separate these kids. And, the same scenarios you've seen. I'm sure you've seen probably Left Behind series. No, I've not seen it, but I'm just saying, I don't know what's in it. But programs like that where they show how the Christians are going to be treated bad. And you can imagine, because I remember when I was younger, I would hear this type of stuff where they talk about, when there's going to be the national Sunday law, and when America's going to suspend its constitution, they're going to come and grab your kids. Your kids are going to be crying, "Oh, save me." And this is the type of stuff that they were teaching. But while they were teaching that, they're for treating others who come in for various different reasons to America, treat them and their family like that. So it's weird because I'm a Christian, so I'm concerned about being treated like that. But all of a sudden, I don't care if others are being treated like that. You see, that's where the problem comes. So we continue reading. We believe every person that enters the country illegally like that should be prosecuted, Sessions told conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt on Tuesday. And you can't be given immunity to people who bring children with them recklessly and improperly and illegally. So I'll pause there again. So this is Jeff Sessions speaking. He says you can't give immunity to people who bring children with them recklessly, improperly, and illegally. All right? So I want you to think about that. You think about this is Jesper Sessions speaking for probably 40% of America or 49% of America. So he's saying basically that a family fleeing, just take the people cases at face value. They say they're coming from, say, Honduras or El Salvador, and they're leaving behind gang violence and drug violence, and they're fleeing for their life. And so they get up one day in the middle of the night and they say, I'm getting out of here. And they grab their kids, grab as much belonging and whatever they have. They can travel on their back and they start heading towards America because they're going for peace. So they're going. And so Jeff Sessions said, no, that's not what's happening. These people, they have to be treated as such and such because they're bringing their kids there recklessly. So it's a reckless act they're doing because they're going to another country illegally and improperly because they're not doing it properly, because there's a proper way to do that. And they're doing it illegally because there's a legal way to do that. This is the type of stuff that don't make no sense. And as I say, if you talk to people or the big conspiracy theorists, they would say that they're getting their guns because they're going to fight back. Think about it, all of them said they're having their guns and everything like that because they have a right to kill American, law enforcement because of their constitutional rights. If you follow them, this is what they say. Because it's not illegal to resist the order of the government because they think the government is wrong. So they would do something that is classified as reckless, improper, and illegal because they say it's their right to protect their property and to protect and fight for their freedom. But now when it's an illegal immigrant or a person from a foreign country saying, I'm escaping, just taking it at face value, since I'm not there, I don't know why they come in, each and every one of them. But many of them saying they're leaving tyranny or poverty or whatever bad situation they're leaving, and they're coming. And the question that they have not asked, including people like Jeff Sessions, is what is the not reckless, not improper, and not illegal way to do that? Do you say, well, I'm going to file, I'm going to do, how are you going to do that? How are you going to get through? And when you go, I used to say if you file to a country, to their embassy, and they turn you down, what is the not reckless, not improper, not illegal way? But this is what I'm saying. So they're saying basically based upon this idea, they turn you down, so based upon the idea that they're not bringing their kids properly, their children properly. I don't know what the proper way, bring them in a limousine. Then this way now, he locking them up in a cage and been locking them up now for 8 months from their parents and treating them like how they talk about they treat the FEMA camp people is a good thing because at least it's not perfect, but it's better than what their parents are doing to them. Keep reading here. The article says, but critics maintain the policy has created a self-inflicted crisis. And the crisis is no problem to me. It's like, what's the big deal? It's how you treat others, the less fortunate. The judge has to go through multiple cases. What is it to him? Anyhow, but critics maintain the policy have created a self-inflicted crisis similar to the one in 2014, where more than 70,000 unaccompanied minors flooded over the U.S. southern border with Mexico, overrunning holding facilities and courtrooms. So just imagine there's 70,000, say each and every one was brothers and sisters. 70,000 minors unaccompanied. So 35,000 kids from families. Just say that was a number. Came across the border. These children risk, these parents decide, look, you go, right? You live, you go escape to America. These kids came. Kids. So Jeff Sessions would say that's reckless, improper, and illegal. So when I have to ask the question, what's going on that a parent would send their kids hundreds of miles? I don't know if it's thousands, so I just say I don't think it's 1,000, but it's say hundreds of miles to risk being raped and killed and robbed and whatever, be beaten by all these rapists that are over there in Mexico, according to the president. Why would people do that to their kids? You think about your kids. What would bring you to that point? That's at least where my mind can think, because I don't know exactly what's going on there. I've watched some documentaries and some of it looks horrid in some of these countries. But what would get you have to think about it for yourself. What would get you to send your child, any child you have below 18, down to 3 and 6, what would possess you in your mind to send your 6-year-old or your 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old hundreds of miles to go to this country without unaccompanied? What would bring you to that? And that to me is probably enough for me. It's just in my thinking. Now there could be something that's going on. Somebody would have another conspiracy theory have to tell me really what they believe all of this is about, because there's probably something that's going on. I'm always open. But in my mind, that's enough for me, because I don't know how many parents, American parents, would I would want him to tell me what is it that would make you do that to your child and say this is better. It's better for me to send my child away across hundreds of miles of border and have them plead to the mercy of Americans than for me to keep my child in this country. What would make you do that? And that to me is the issue of this concept of the FEMA camp conspiracy theories and how they ignore the plight of the less fortunate. I guess that's what I'm going to change the topic to, because that's more probably specific. How the FEMA camp conspiracy theorists, how they ignore the plight of the less fortunate. Because that to me is a statement of desperation. That there's something must be so desperate that would make me or anybody take a child and say, I'm going to send you hundreds of miles and plead for the mercy of these people because there's no future in this place and your safety is not guaranteed. All you're going to end up having is being raped and killed and whatever. So go along the border. If you get raped and whatever and you make it to America, at least you make it there and you have some safety. But here you're just going to get raped repeatedly. Anyhow, so U.S. Representative Fileman Vela, Democrat from Texas, spent the past week along the border meeting with church officials and immigrant advocates. He said he's requested information from the Department of Homeland Security, who oversees immigration agencies, particularly on the status of the children. It's a mess, Vela said. This is essentially an unaccompanied minor crisis manufactured by the President of the United States. Officials have not released exact figures on how many children are being held alone and how often they are reunited with their parents. The Department of Health and Human Services, who is responsible for the minors, did not reply to several interview requests for this article. Since mid-May, Aleman Bendix, the federal public defender, said they have been more than 430 children separated from their parents in the McAllen sector alone. At Wednesday's hearing, she asked each of the 13 defendants who had been separated from their children to stand. None of them had criminal record and only one had previously been deported. One man from Honduras, Freddy Diaz, had been separated from his 9-year-old son. A woman from Honduras, Maria Ramirez, had lost her 6-year-old daughter. Almond Bendix said she had asked OR, which is the people taking care of these kids or taking these kids, to list for a list of the children in order to help reunite the families, but hadn't received a reply. The defendants were given a phone number to call to inquire about their children, but they didn't have access to phones in their holding facilities. She said she feared some of the parents would get deported without their sons and daughters and urged the court for help. This is a tragedy that is happening right before this court, Aleman Bendix said. Magistrate Judge Peter Ormsby said he sympathized with the families, but his court didn't have jurisdiction to order the agencies to release information. I trust and hope you will be reunited with your family members, he told the defendant. And that can't be comfortable coming from somebody within the system, somebody that represents the system, and saying, oh, well, he didn't say, oh, well, I hope you're reunited with your family. That must be jarring to hear. I also hope you understand that the reason you are separated is that you violated the law of the United States. So you broke the law by seeking asylum. After the 3-hour hearing, the defendants' hands were reshackled and they were led out of the court in small groups. And that is what ended up happening. So notice again, this is a similar concept of suspending on the Constitution, because here's the thing about this idea here. You don't really have to suspend the Constitution when the majority of people working in the system, in the American federal system, don't believe that the Constitution extends to people who are foreigners. Remember, when President George Bush set up Guantanamo as a torture site and various different torture sites in various different countries, the idea was, number one, if it's not on American soil, you can torture because the Constitution doesn't apply. Also, if it is people who are not American citizens, the Constitution doesn't apply. So notice, it's not so much that America, according to George W. Bush and his cabinet, is not so much that the Constitution is what we believe in as rights for human beings. Is that only if you're American that Constitution apply, or if you're on American soil. And that was a very important concept that came out of that time. And I remember looking at that then, I was like, so that means if I'm in America, the Constitution apply. So if I'm outside of America and if I'm an American citizen, the Constitution might not apply. It depends who's in power. So it's not so much that this is the way how I behave as an American or as a human being. This is just depends on location. Then secondly, if the person is not an American, you can apply unusual and cruel punishment. So hence, this is why you could take somebody to Libya. Libya was one of those areas that they were doing torture, although the person was American doing the torture, working for the federal government, who swear to uphold the Constitution, who swear to uphold the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, all that stuff. They could still take somebody to Libya and torture them while being American, while working for the federal government. And nothing will come off it because they say, well, it only applies to American citizens, or if you're on this American soil, the Constitution and my behavior working for the American government, representing the American government, does not matter only if I'm in America. And that's what it is. And think about it. To me, it was enshrined when they put into place the current head of the CIA, because she was involved with torturing people. I think it was in Asia somewhere. Indonesia is the word country coming to me, or Thailand. So notice here, you have all these Americans who swear to uphold the Constitution and believe that you shouldn't do cruel and unusual punishment to people you hold as prisoners. You're already holding them. You're not going to really do. So they believe, yes, if I'm in America, but if I'm outside of America as an American, I believe in the Constitution and I swear to uphold it and I'm working for the government, I can torture you all I want because that's only apply if you're American. Same thing with, as I say, Guantanamo Bay. You can just torture these people, waterboard them, do all kind of stuff you want, beat them, stab them, sexually harass them, all kind of stuff, because you're not in America. It only applies in America. So then that shows the hypocrisy, because then it is not. It's one thing if you had, like, say, for instance, an American on vacation or working as a private person, and he was running a torture site. You would say, okay, but this is people who are in foreign countries working for the government, who do not believe that they have to uphold the Constitution when in a foreign country, but yet they represent America, which is representing the Constitution. It's very weird to see this developing, but this is where we're at. So if you notice in these things, like the FEMA conspiracy theorist camp, these camps these concepts are constantly being put in place, because remember, no cruel and unusual punishment if you're not black, because this is why this was happening to the thing. I remember when the Abu Ghraib or Abu Ghraib, whatever you pronounce it, in Iraq prison scandal broke, and they find that these prison guards were torturing people in Abu Ghraib in Iraq. And then you find there were females doing this, plus male. It was not just males doing this. So it's not a male-female issue, because you look again, the head of the CIA, she's female, but she's a torturer. So when you look at this, you start to notice, again, the same pattern with Abu Ghraib. They were there, or Abu Ghraib, they were there torturing these people, but they were working, again, for the American government. They were doing the job that they're supposed to represent America. But all of a sudden, the Constitution did not apply again. It was just basically these people are enemies and we need to torture them. And we not need to even torture them for any reason, just torture them because they're animals. And so they were running these things. But what the problem is, some of these people were people who worked in prisons in America. So you could, but who were they torturing in America? They were torturing who is the primary people in America? Black prisoners. So you have these people, they're already trained to torture people who are less, the least amongst us. And then just took it and just applied to the Iraqi citizens. So this is where you have the problem is often is it that I believe in these theories. I believe this idea that we hold this truth self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then from that concept comes the idea of how do you treat people who you think are less fortunate? How do you treat minorities? How do you treat people who are imprisoned? How do you treat people who are even doing illegal activities, no matter how barbaric? And do you treat people who are coming to the border barbaric and vicious just as a deterrent because they're illegal and the Constitution, according to people like you, Jeff Sessions, doesn't apply to them because they're not. You're not going to treat them because they're created by God and they're human beings. I'm treating them because they broke the law of the land. And for that reason, I'm going to treat them like I would treat the black people in prison. This is where the problem comes in. And this is why you can see they can do this wickedness. And they have no conscience about it. Actually, they feel like they're doing good and they're real Americans stand up for America and they're protecting America. And they do this without no conscience. And this is why this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse because the people who are promoting this, often they're people who say, these people say the real crime, what making America not great, is abortion. And so they say we're gonna have to protect the life of the unborn. And this is the big hit. This is what they say. This is what God. But while they're doing this, the things that Christ is concerned with, they seem to actually be the ones doing it. So remember, the FEMA camp idea is similar to what Adolf Hitler did. And they're fearing that the Adolf Hitler situation will be repeat. But remember, Adolf Hitler again, the majority, in Adolf Hitler time, the majority persecuted the minority. It was the foreigners and those who were non-German who were primarily, and some dissidents, who were primarily gassed and killed. That's the issue. The issue is not Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The issue is those who have the power, America, is using the Jews to exterminate Palestinian. You could look at, oh no, but how about this, how about that? That's not the point. The point is, notice how the situation always go. The devil used the majority, the Broadway people, to kill and maim and destroy the minority. Again, if you remember with Hitler again, it was the majority who were the citizens who figured a way to identify people who looked like them for the most part, who were Jews, and started to exterminate them. And this was his method. So these conspiracy theories who represent the majority always are concerned, oh, look at us, we poor us, we're being overrun. Let's start lock these people up and let's start imprison them and let's start put a plan together how we're gonna put in a camp black people because they might overrun us and they might be militant against us. This was the previous FEMA director. So they're not seeing it as always those people who have the power and the volume or the numbers they go up against, and they start to inflict inhumane treatment to others. And this is what we see going. So the system is building and the people are developing the mindset so that they can look at the suffering of others who are less fortunate and say, they're not coming to America. They're coming to America because they're elite. They're just coming here to break our laws. They want to step foot on our land because they're wild animals and they're vicious rapists and stuff like that. So whatever we do to them, that's nice. See, they're developing the mindset. And over the years, I've been seeing this mindset develop. Because the mindset is, number one, if you're an American, we can torture you, lock you up, separate your kids from you, do all these things. So as to me, as more and more people follow this ideology, you're going to see how it will be easy for them now to turn around and say, you keep the commandment of God, you protest immorality, you're not for all this sodomy and all this wicked treatment of the poor, the less fortunate, we're going to lock you up. And it'll be easy because guess what happened? It's been developing over the years where they're not looking at it as human rights and God-given rights. They're just looking at it as, well, if you're not part of us, we can do this to you. And that's where the problem is. At least that's how Lloyd Grubb sees it. So I'll read his text here. And this is why it was so easy for the Jews to kill Christ. And they couldn't get it. That's why they didn't get it. Because why? They had developed this wickedness in their mind. And this wickedness just kept on getting worse and worse until it's nothing to grab some kids and lock them in a cage, separate them from the parents, no matter how much they cried, and have no heart with it. And I'm guaranteed they go home and they feel proud. They say, I uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. I have some kids in cage and their parents are locked up and shackled. Hurrah. And I'm a true American upholding the Constitution. Not seeing that what they're doing is not right, because that's how far gone they are. And you can imagine when those people were torturing those Muslims in Abu Ghraib, or those Arabs over there in Guantanamo, they were torturing them in Libya, and I look at it and say, Gaddafi got what was coming to him, because Gaddafi joined with America to torture Muslims, and then they turn around and kill him. This is the type of stuff that happened. Because again, he wouldn't believe in anything that America believes, because he don't believe in human rights. And so it was nothing for people like him to join with Americans to torture people. Nothing for people like Syrians and some of these other countries. Almost all these countries that join with it, if you go back and look, and one day I'm going to do a program and show you, all these countries that ended up were used by America to torture people, even though many of these people were literally animals, and you and I would even be afraid of them. It turned around, and many of them, America turned around and try to destroy them in the end. So it's like, you don't join with torturers. So that's why I'm not going to ever side by God's grace, because unless I lost my salvation and I've been demon possessed, I'm never going to side with people who I need to side with you to torture others. Not going to do it. As I say, if I do this, and you mark my word, if you want to hear me come on the radio and say, great, it's good to take away people's kids and torture people and stuff like that, I have lost my salvation. And you no longer listen to me. I'm not a Christian anymore. That's how I look at it. You lost your mind if you believe that you need to use the American government and American political machine, military machine, to torture people and to brutalize people and bomb them. As I heard somebody say, what's the national bird of Pakistan? And they say it's the American drone. If you believe that all you need to do is get up every day and rain bomb down on small villages without no due process, no proper investigation, or take some of the word at such and such a latitude, at such and such a whatever, bomb them, and then you find out thousands of people being maimed and killed, and it was the wrong coordinates being sent. You do that, lost your mind. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5 verse 3 onward, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. We mourn with those who are mourning. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Let's pray. Our Father was in heaven, we thank you for your blessing in our lives. We pray that you may continue to have us as peacemakers, not as warmongers. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might be kind to all people. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks to be with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow live again, where we should do Wisdom for Living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.